Happy Wednesday, everybody. So anybody who knows me, especially my students, know I love history and I love local history. So today I have a nonfiction book for you. So do you know what nonfiction means? So nonfiction means it is true. So this is a true story. And this is a bit of a biography, and a biography is the true story of someone's life. And I'm sharing this special book with you today because it is a book about someone who was actually born in Galesburg. Someone famous that was born in Galesburg and actually contributed something wonderful to our society. So today's book is called Mr. Ferris and His Wheel. So did you know that the creator of the Ferris wheel is from Galesburg? Wow. That's awesome. So if you actually go to, I know Discovery Depot, when they're open back up, they have a big Ferris wheel exhibit, and it's because of Mr. Ferris. And we're going to learn all about Mr. Ferris and how he created the Ferris wheel. And at the end of this read aloud today, I have a challenge for you. So this is Mr. Ferris and His Wheel, and it's written by Catherine Gibbs Davis and illustrated by Gilbert Ford. And you'll notice that some of my books look like they're from our library, and they are. So if you really like any of these books, you can actually check them out from the Mabel Woolsey Library once we get back to school. So this is Mr. Ferris and His Wheel. All right, let me get situated. It was only 10 months until the next World's Fair, but everyone was still talking about the star attraction of the last World's Fair. At 81 stories, France's Eiffel Tower was the world's tallest building. Its pointy iron and air tower soared so high that visitors to the top could see Paris in one breathtaking sweep. Have you ever heard of the Eiffel Tower? And then there are a lot of captions in this book. So this says, completed in 1889, the Eiffel Tower stood at 986 feet, surpassing America's Washington Monument to become the world's tallest man-made structure. Now it was America's turn to impress the world at the 1893 Chicago World's Fair. But what could outshine the famous French Tower? And who would build it? A nationwide contest was announced. And it says, before TV and the internet, people from around the globe gathered at World's Fairs to share their different ways of life and new technologies. Tasty inventions such as hamburgers and Cracker Jacks first appeared here. So the hamburger was first seen at the World's Fair. Contest drawings poured in from around the country, but most of the plans looked like the Eiffel Tower, only bigger. The fair judges said no to every last one. Was this really the best that American engineers could muster? To an ambitious young civil engineer, this contest was more than a dare. It was a matter of national pride. George Washington Gale Ferris Jr. had already designed some of the country's biggest bridges, tunnels, and roads. He could never allow a French tower to overshadow America's World's Fair. Why hadn't the United States built the world's first skyscraper? George had seen the elegant steel frame rise 10 stories high with his own eyes. Supported by a metal frame instead of solid walls, Chicago's home insurance building was the world's first skyscraper. Bird cages were the inspiration for the metal frame. George had an idea for a structure that would dazzle and move, not just stand still like the Eiffel Tower. Back at his drawing board in Pittsburgh, he and his engineering partner, William Gronow, measured and remeasured. A mistake of even an inch could bring their invention crashing down. George arrived in Chicago and made his case to the construction chief of the fair. The chief stared at George's drawings. No one had ever created a fair attraction that huge and complicated. The chief told George that his structure was so flimsy it would collapse. George had heard enough. He rolled up his drawings and said, "You are an architect, sir. I am an engineer." George knew something the chief did not. His invention would be delicate looking and strong. It would be both stronger and lighter than the Eiffel Tower because it would be built with an amazing new metal, steel. George was a steel expert, and his structure would be made of a steel alloy. Alloys combine a super strong mix of a hard metal with 2 or more chemical elements. The judges could not decide. Fall turned to winter as they dilly-dallied. In only 4 months, the fair would open, and it still had no star attraction. Finally, desperate, they agreed to give George's far-fetched idea a try. But they would not give him 1 penny for the materials to build it. The clock was ticking. George dashed from bank to bank, asking for help. But when he began describing his invention, lenders laughed him into the street. So George used his own savings and convinced a few wealthy investors to join him. Still short of money, he boldly went ahead and ordered the parts he needed from a dozen different steel mills. There we go. In January 1893, George's construction crew began work on the foundation. Shovels broke as the workers tried digging into the frozen ground. It was one of the most brutally cold winters in Chicago history. Blast! George ordered his crew to dynamite the icy earth. But what they found underneath was scarier still. Quicksand! The deadly muck could suck man or machine under in seconds. George and his brave workers kept frantically digging. Finally, 35 feet down, they hit solid ground. They planted 2 huge steel towers deep into the earth, bolted them to crossbars of steel, and poured in cement to hold it all in place. Then they carefully lowered a 70-ton axle with fittings, the weight of a mogul locomotive train, between them. This sturdy structure would hold the gigantic invention steady in even the strongest Chicago winds. As time grew shorter, freight trains from all over the country chugged on into the fairgrounds, loaded with more than 100,000 parts. Workers hurried to fit all the pieces together like giant Lego toys. Hammers pounded nonstop in the breathless race to finish. Responsible for the wheel's many structural details, George's partner was losing hope. Finally, with only 2 months left, the last section was bolted into place. And there stood a perfect, enormous circle, 834 feet in circumference, rising 265 feet above the ground, and designed to move with the precision of the smallest watch. It looked exactly how George had first imagined it back as a boy on his ranch in Nevada. So George Ferris moved from Galesburg to Nevada when he was about, 5 years old. So he was born in Galesburg, but didn't grow up here. Still, the biggest test was yet to come. The monster wheel had to spin, and George's elegant passenger car still had to be hung. The tireless crew worked day and night to attach them. Each was the size of a living room, with enormous picture windows and 40 velvet seats. Wow, that sounds a little more in-depth than the ones we see at carnivals, don't they? On June 21st, 1893, opening day finally arrived. 2,000 people gathered as flags waved. George took the stave and dedicated his wheel to the noble profession of engineering. Then George's wife presented him with a beautiful golden whistle. George and his wife stepped proudly into car number 1, followed by their nervous but excited guests. Uniformed guards closed and locked the door. Would the wheel work? George blew the golden whistle. 2,000 tons of steel began to turn around as the soft clanking of a large chain drove the mighty machine. Up, up, up the car quietly floated above the mud and noise. So down here, the caption tells me that 2 steam engines, an extra one in case one broke, made the wheel turn. George had them hidden under the wooden platform where the riders boarded. Let me get this, there we go. As the car was lifted higher, everyone rose from the velvet seats and crowded to the windows. Spread out below them was a dizzying sweep of the fairgrounds, the city of Chicago, and sparkling Lake Michigan, and even glimpses of 3 faraway states. So I'm going to pause there. So for my older students, I know my 4th grade students, if you look at a map and are in Chicago, what 3 states do you think they may have seen? Take a guess. Below, more cars were loaded, and after the people had gone 2 times around and had 20 glorious airborne minutes in motion, powerful brakes brought the wheel to a whisper-soft stop. When the conductor called, "All out," everyone begged to go around again. The wheel is safe. The news raced across through the fairgrounds, through the city of Chicago, and across the country. All summer, visitors from around the world traveled to Chicago World's Fair. It didn't matter whether one was a senator, a farmer, a boy, or girl. Everyone wanted to take a spin on the magnificent wheel. Adventurous couples asked to get married on it. On hot, steamy days, the wheel was the perfect place to escape up, up, up into the cooling breezes. All you needed was 50 cents. And this tells us over here the caption. During the 19 weeks the wheel was in operation, 1.5 million passengers rode it. It revolved more than 10,000 times, withstood gale force winds and storms, and did not need one repair. So George Ferris must have been a wonderful engineer. At night, George Ferris's wheel became a magical glowing circle with 3,000 electric light bulbs, another brand new invention. As the Queen of the Midway made its stately rotation, so did the seasons. Soon a fall chill filled the air, and fair visitors began to thin out. And this is a fun fact as well about history. In the late 1800s, homes were still lit with candles and kerosene lamps. The Chicago World's Fair helped reassure people that electricity was safe. At night, farmers and sailors from as far away as 40 miles could see the wheel's spectacular blaze of lights. Wow, that's very far. On October 26th, 1893, just before midnight, the immense twinkling, spinning circle slowed to its final stop. The Chicago World's Fair was over. George had called his creation a monster wheel, but his investors renamed it after its inventor, the Ferris wheel. Visitors returned to their homes to tell the story of the world's greatest ride, and before long, copies of the Ferris wheel began popping up around the world. In 1894, the next Ferris wheel appeared in California on a cliff overlooking the Pacific Ocean. Lit up at night, It was the first landmark seen by ships finding their way home. Today, Ferris wheels are the most familiar and beloved carnival ride at state fairs and amusement parks. A ride on one still feels like flying to the moon in oh, the view. And it says since 1893, there have been several tallest ever Ferris wheels. And the race continues with proposed new record holders for the world's tallest, including the New York wheel, which is 630 feet, and the Dubai Eye at 690 feet. Oh my goodness, I cannot even imagine riding on one of those. And so there's a picture of George Washington Gale Ferris. Scoot back over. So I love this book. It was a little bit of a longer read aloud, but it's a very, very cool, true story with roots right here in our area. So if you are a younger student, so in kindergarten, maybe first grade, second grade, can you think of what happened in the beginning, the middle, and the end? If you're in third or fourth grade, can you think of some character traits that describe Mr. Ferris? And my challenge for you does not have to do with reading today. So it is a building challenge, or you could draw or create it out of anything. Can you make a Ferris wheel? Better yet, can you make something that moves? That would be really tricky. But use any materials you have to try to make a Ferris wheel, and I would love to see pictures of it. I'll see you tomorrow.